Good afternoon. This is Caitlin Clary with the Great Journey podcast series. And today we're speaking with 8th degree black belt, Sensei Marty Callahan. Today's podcast is called A Watched Pot Never Boils. Now that's that's an expression that I've heard many times in my life, but I didn't know there was actually a very famous person who stated those words that I just learned about today. Sensei, who was that?
That was actually Benjamin Franklin.
Okay.
Back in 1787 or something like that.
So that quote's been around for a long time.
It's been around a long time.
Yes.
And it's an interesting quote too, in that what it's telling us is that once you set something in motion, and there's nothing more that you can do about that thing, then the best thing you can do is just let it go. So if you were putting a pot of water on the stove to boil, to heat, then what he's saying is put it on, put the heat on, and then walk away.
Right.
And let it boil.
Right.
But if you stand there and you're watching it and you're watching it, well, then it's just going to seem like it's going to go on forever.
It's true.
Yeah. Now it actually will boil.
Yes.
But the amount of time that it seems to be taking is going to be much longer.
It's the minor things sucking up some mental energy that wasn't necessary to be used that way.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think that also refers to something that we discuss, or that our students learn too, is to be able to free your mind. And when your mind is attached to something small like that, and you're watching its every move, then your mind isn't free. Your mind is locked into that thing.
Right.
So you want to know, sometimes it's important to lock your mind on something, but other times it's important to just let it go.
Right. So this would be an example in our day-to-day life, especially as adults, is just watching the news and the things that are going on in life right now.
Oh yeah.
Vaccines, etc.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. So when our viewers watch this, it could be some years in the future.
True. We're in the middle of a pandemic.
Yeah. It's called coronavirus.
It's 2021. It's 2020's evil stepbrother.
But so what I see, and I have a bad habit of watching the news all the time, and I want to stay informed, but that goes overboard.
Yes.
And what I realized was happening to me just a couple of days ago was that I listened to the news, and they're talking about the vaccine coming out and how it's slow to come out because of the weather, or
all the reasons,
or whatever the reason is, and that this age group is getting it, but these other people are not getting it, and these other people want to get it, and these other people, they got their first one but they didn't get their second one. There's just on and on and on. And I realized that it was just making me more and more anxious about the whole thing.
Absolutely.
And I'm not anxious about it. I figure I'll get my vaccine when I get it.
Right.
And if I die in the meantime, well, okay.
Okay. You have no control over that. So
I mean, I do my best. Here's my mask.
Gotta be healthy. Yes.
We're not
got all that.
We're not 6 feet. We're not 6 feet apart. We are 6 feet apart.
Yeah. Well.
Close enough.
Yeah. No, I understand what you're talking about. I know that there's a family member of ours who is very fearful of COVID, and not that it's something to be disregarded, but people have different levels of how they're responding to it. And they're watching how many people before them can get the vaccine before they can. And it's like, there's 65 million people before me. And it's kind of like watching a pot that never boils. You're watching a number that goes down, and it's millions of people. And so all that would cause so much angst and anxiety, because your focus is so much intensive on that one spot, where maybe just backing off from it and living your life a little bit would help not only the time pass quicker, but just help relieve yourself from the toxicity of the negativity and the concern.
Yeah. The stress itself can do you in.
For sure.
And so it's better. You've got to look at, we're living through this pandemic, and we're having to social distance, wear masks, we're having to stay in our homes, and all this stuff that we have to do to get through this pandemic. But the the cure, what's the saying, that the cure can be worse than the disease.
Oh, yes.
In some sense.
Right.
So if the cure is causing you to stress out enormously, then yeah, that can take you down.
Right.
So
your immune system drops and all those things. And unfortunately, the reality is our life can be taken at any moment for something that has nothing to do with a disease.
Yeah.
So you could be spending all this time waiting for a vaccine, thinking that's going to be your savior. But really, anytime you get in a car, you're just giving up the control to something beyond yourself.
Yeah.
So, so going back to the control factor in a watch pot never boils.
Yes.
I know this can tie into parenting, and I have 3 kids myself, so I'm very familiar with this. I try not to be this type of parent, but I know that it's very easy to be. So could you please talk to us about that?
Yeah. So there's terms that are used in our society nowadays about helicopter parenting, and the new term that has come out in the last year or so is, I believe it's called lawnmower parenting.
Okay.
Or snowplow parenting.
Right.
Where the parent is so determined for their child to succeed that they want to remove every single obstacle that's in their child's way so that the child can get by.
Right.
And
the quote you said, it was preparing the road for the child is the wrong way to go about it. You need to prepare the child for the road.
Yes, prepare your child for the road. Don't prepare the road for your child.
Yes, I love that.
Yeah, and because your child, and another concept that we had talked about in 1 or 2 podcasts back was the term anti-fragility.
Yes.
So there's things that are fragile that if they broke, they're broken, like a teacup or something.
Right.
And then there's things that are really resistant, like a plastic cup. It's not, you could drop that to the ground all day long. It's not going to break.
Right.
But then there's the concept of anti-fragility, meaning that this is something that actually needs stress.
Yes.
It needs a certain amount of roughness in
in
order for it to grow and get strong.
Okay.
It's what they say about rough play.
Okay.
Boys like to roughhouse.
Right.
And girls do it too to some extent, but it's the roughhousing that is actually necessary for their growth, for their personal growth.
I had this vision, I don't know if this relates properly, but like of breaking a Mustang or something, a horse, and having to go through all that work and effort to then.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And because you've gone through that effort to break the horse, is that the correct term for that? Breaking the horse?
I believe it is breaking the horse. Yeah.
Okay. But you go to the extent to do that now you get this gentle animal that you can ride, and you can do all kinds of different things with it.
Right. Yeah.
But you had to go through that process in order to get to that point.
Yeah. So I will say, just a little tidbit for my little life. I have a 16-year-old son who still has his permit because thanks to the pandemic, getting into the DMV is not an easy feat right now. But releasing control is driving. Last night, this is why it's so fresh in my head, is because last night he drove my husband and myself to Sebastopol to go to Scream and Mimi's, which if you're in Sebastopol, California, it's amazing ice cream. But it was at night and he hadn't been on the highway yet. And, there's not as many streetlights as it is driving around town. So I've gotten comfortable driving with him around town, but I definitely had this whole... to my husband, should both of us leave, and leave our 2 other kids at home? Our whole life is in our child. To me, he's this little boy, still this 6-year-old child's hands, one wrong move, and we have orphan daughters. And this is how far us typically moms go. My husband's like, oh, we're good, everything's fine. One of us has to worry, right? But I had to sit in a certain spot in the back seat to where I couldn't see the speedometer. I couldn't see his face. I couldn't see it because I would try to be on top of everything and say everything. So anyway, it was good for me. That actually ties into our last podcast. That was having courage in the face of danger. You'll have to go back to listen to that one. So anyway, that release of control is very difficult for me. And I think typically often parents just, we all just want the best for our kids, but sometimes that means letting them make mistakes and letting them go through oftentimes it's letting them go through hard times so they can learn these things on their own.
Yeah. And to tie that back into the dojo too, we want to, it's really important when you see your child out on the floor, just let the process that we're going to take your child through, let that process unfold. Let it unfold on its own. Don't examine it too carefully. Think in terms of the long term. Look a year from now, 4 years from now, 10 years from now, what type of person they're going to be as a result of this experience.
Absolutely.
Don't look too closely at the here and now.
Yeah, especially for, always, but especially for people who aren't familiar, parents that aren't familiar with martial arts. You guys know what you're doing. You're the experts. We're letting you have our kids. That's a release of control, and we're trusting your process and trusting your instruction. And you guys do an excellent job.
Thank you. Well, I've been doing this now for 51 years. And we've had more than 15,000 students. We've made mistakes along the way. There's no doubt about it, but we've learned from those mistakes and we've gone on, and we've produced some fabulous young people as a result of that, who've grown into great adults. So
I believe it. And I've read the testimonials. So absolutely.
Good.
All right, everybody. A watched pot never boils, and neither does a watch speedometer when your 16-year-old is driving. Okay. All right. Have a great day. We'll see you next time on the Great Journey podcast series.
Okay. Bye.